we haven't even reached the peak of Lionsgate. So anyway, that is going to be finished with during eclipse season. So for me, that's kind of like just heightened energy, maybe different kinds of heightened energy. So we'll talk about it in astrology today. Next week for my Moon Madness, Moon Magic. My Moon Magic people, I'm going to do a live about the eclipses and how to use that energy. Okay? So let's check it out this morning. Time. Friendship. I'm feeling pretty strongly that some of you are moving from friendship into a relationship. This is a relationship with feminine. It's some kind of so Aries is very active. That axis of Aries and Libra is active. So look at your numbers.
Just got out of the food pantry. They didn't have any food I could eat.
Definitely has to do with
So that sucks. And I was like, well, maybe I can just come up here.
self-love, taking care of yourself. Because Saturn in retrograde says, what's not working, let's fix that.
My name is Phil Novoa.
And my
No one cares, Phil.
So this morning, I'm going to talk to you about a
We're gonna
particularly
do this
vigorous
here
and dangerous
instead.
form of divine madness, which is called falling in love. Which is, from a practical point of view, one of the most insane things you can do, or that can happen to you. Because in the eyes of a given woman or a given man, an opposite, who though through the eyes of everybody else, a perfectly plain, ordinary person, can appear to be God or goddess incarnate, to be such an enchantment that one can say in the words of an old song that probably dates me, every little breeze seems to whisper the weeds. And this is an extraordinary, disruptive experience, a subversive experience in the conduct of human affairs. Because you never know when it will strike, or for what reason. It's something like contracting a very chronic disease once you get into it. And we try to resolve it sometimes by making it the basis for a marriage. It is an extraordinarily dangerous thing to do. And this is because in Western civilization, we have a tradition of the family which is very curious and which would seem to be the most ridiculous composition of disparate ideas imaginable.
I'm also going to be doing memberships.
When we go back to the origins of Western civilization in the Hebrew and Christian traditions, we find that the idea of marriage and the experience of falling in love are really rather separate things. Because in those earlier times, in agrarian cultures, nobody ever chose their marriage partner. There are certain exceptions to this, that in ancient Greece, you occasionally find a woman who is called a Parthenos, which has been mistranslated virgin. The correct meaning of Parthenos is a woman who chooses her own husband. And there were very few of them. In that passage in the book of the prophet Isaiah, where it says, "Behold, a virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and his name shall be called Emmanuel," that is in Greek, Parthenos. A Parthenos shall conceive. And it therefore has nothing strictly to do with a virgin, although a woman who chooses her own husband might conceivably be a virgin. But by and large, a marriage was an alliance of families. And it was contracted not simply for the purpose of raising children, yes, but also to create a social unit smaller than a village. A village, therefore, being a cluster of families, and these families were rather large. So, families allied. The oldsters, the grandpa and grandma, who had an enormous voice in who their children were going to marry, used to, as you know, I suppose this is no news to any of you, used to dicker and use go-betweens, and they considered not only whether this girl was suitable for their son and vice versa, but also what kind of a dowry she would bring, whether it would be advantageous to the two families to form such an alliance. And of course, these things almost up to quite recent times were always important in the marital affairs of royal families. But as is notorious, all royal families and kings and queens kept concubines and had outside arrangements when and if they should happen to fall in love. And even if they didn't, they had mistresses simply to prevent monogamy from becoming monotonous. So that is the basis, you see, and that is why to this day marriage is a civil and or religious ceremony, the basis of which is a contract, a legal contract, which one signs on the dotted line. And therefore there are all kinds of laws, as the laws relate to contracts, that this contract is very difficult to get out of.
Thank you.
The rationale for that being quite obvious.
This is Midas. He's my baby. Like, and the fucking baby's here.
Secure environment for children, but also just the general stability of things. Because when people break up a marriage, it's sort of unnerving for everyone. You see a couple and you think for a long time that they're the happiest and best adjusted couple you ever met. The next thing you know is that they've split up. And you begin to think, now what goes on here? Are all my friends crazy? Because you see people breaking up all around. Of course, you call it breaking up. That's a put-down phrase, to break up. Especially it sounds like smashing something, as if something precious has been smashed. Whereas it may be something quite different altogether, depending on how you evaluate it. But now, into this kind of feudal conception of marriage, there came in, very largely, I think, as a result of the poetic movement that was centered in southern France, in Provence, in the Middle Ages, what is called the cult of courtly love. This is something about which scholars dispute. According to one theory, the knightly or courtly
You do it on equal on both sides.
would select a lady to be his heart's desire, preferably a married lady. And he would yearn for her and sing songs under her window and send messages to her and little tokens of his devotion. But according to this particular theory, he must never go to bed with her. Not only would that be adultery, but it would spoil the state of being in love. That it should always be an unfulfilled state and an unhappy state. This is the theory of Denis de Rougemont in his book Love in the Western World, or Passion in Society, as two titles. And the other theory is probably more realistic.
Thanks. I'll try not to.
This was, first of all, the great ladies of the noble families were awfully poor because their husbands were always out hunting and making war, wenching and so on. And therefore they had to have lovers too. And so they did indeed have adulterous affairs on the side. And a great deal of poetry was about this. Because you see, it's my friend Janko Varta always says that laws about sexual relationships should never be liberalized. There should always be strict disapproval of adultery and fornication, because if there is not that strict disapproval, if it's not difficult to attain, it's less fun. And I have worked out, those of you who have read my book, Beyond Theology, I've worked out a whole theory of the Christian repression of sex, that the secret intent of it was to make people more interested in sex. Because if there is complete liberality and promiscuity in every direction, it all becomes so easy that it might be dangerous to become before. And then people would seek other dissipation of perhaps a less healthy kind. So then, as a result of the gradual fusion of these two approaches to the relationship of the sexes, we have arrived at the idea of the romantic marriage, in which the two trends are misallied, to say the very least. You are supposed, therefore, to fall in love with them, and of your own choice, or even let's see that way, if you fall in love. That is a choice. And then enter into that relationship with a legal contract, in which you get up before a magistrate or a priest, as you solemnly swear that you will be faithful to each other until death do you part. Which is often another. And it seems to be perfectly obvious that two young people are extremely anxious to get into each other's embraces. And the only way of doing so, under the circumstances, is entering into this contract. Will naturally be ready to promise anything to fulfill this desire. And while there are, indeed, many legally married couples who have a very, very happy lives, that goes on all their lives. And we don't hear about them because good news is never news. It's only the unhappy couples who make the newspaper. And there are enormous numbers of them, but they are mainly, I think, people who are lucky. There is no way of making marriage work, as far as I know.
Right, hello.
Because every attempt to make a marriage work is secretly within the breast of each partner builds up hostility. You can, I know all this, I'm speaking from certain non-civic experience. You can work very hard to keep the marriage together. And as you do so, you may fail to recognize that you are being untrue to your own emotions. And you think, well, I must control my emotions for the sake of children, for the sake of society, for the sake of everything like that. And so you work and work, and one of the ways of working is to try to convince yourself that you're in love.
How are y'all doing?
And you go through the pretenses of love. You hypnotize yourself with loving language towards your partner. You go out of your way, you make little lists. You remember the attentions you would pay. You keep a diary in which you remember your wedding anniversary, which is very lovely together. And all these things, and you really work it. Now, the more you work it, the more you're building up promises and expectations for something that you are probably not going to come through with at the level of deep feeling. And everyone is well aware of it. Is a indicator. You know it in the back of your mind. And so you build yourself implicitly into a wall-to-wall trap. And so the mutual hostility grows worse and worse and worse, so that one psychologist was recently known to ask the patient, with whom are you not again? The most awkward form of falling in love is between people who are already married to someone else. And because you see, this is a cataclysmic and disruptive experience in our present social order. And we know, Victorian novels, a lot of people are still living out Victorian novels. But in Victorian novels, the great thing is where a couple madly in love with each other say to each other, well, it's best for us that we don't see each other anymore. This is becoming bigger than either of us. And so this fantastically
I just exercised and
is denied.
because I had my hips and my spine both shattered. I got screws, pins, rods all over my body.
What should one do?
And if I don't keep doing this every day,
Well, as I've often
I
said,
wind up in
I'm
a
not
lot of
fit,
pain.
and therefore I
So I
don't
just
know
do
what
this
to
for
do.
free to let people know that there is a way out.
I would like to make some reflections on this particular form of madness and to raise again a very disturbing question. And this disturbing question is as follows. Is it only when you're in love with another person that you see them as they really are?
Maintain our own personal
And in
alignment
the
and
ordinary way,
sovereignty.
when you're not in love with people, you see only
Good morning.
fragmented versions of each. Because when you're in love with someone, you do indeed see them as a divine being. And suppose that's what they are truly. Your eyes have by your beloved been opened, in which case your beloved is serving to you as a kind of guru, an initiator. And that is why there is a form of sexual yoga, based on the idea that man and woman are to each other as mutual gurus and students. And through a tremendous outpouring of psychic energy, in total devotion and worship to this other person, who is respectively the goddess or the god, you realize by total fusion and contact with the other organisms, you go down to the divine center in them, and it bounces back, and you discover your own. Or you could put it in this way, which is another aspect of it, that by falling in love, and regarding falling in love not just as a sort of sexual infatuation, because it's always more than that, isn't it? You can have great sexual enjoyment
Thank you.
with a pleasant friend, you know.
Well, like literally,
But you may
it was
do
not
so
flexible
simply
because
because
after
you are
shattering my
free.
hips and my
That
spine,
you
I have all this metal in my body. It was not like that at all.
But when you fall in love, it's much more
But
serious.
doing this every day helps to
You just
relax,
cannot forget this person.
helps
You
me
feel
find my
miserable
center.
when not in their presence. You're always yearning. Let's see more of each other. Let's get together.
But I
Let's,
got
we're completely
hurt at
entangled.
20, so it's,
And then you see, you've
and even then I wasn't very flexible. I was very rigid. I was angry.
And the Hindus were sensible enough to realize that this was a means of awakening, enlightenment, and therefore it was surrounded with a sort of religious, ritual, meditative art, with a form of sexual yoga that is designed to allow the feeling of mutual love, to the extent of grand passion, to have an extremely fitting fulfillment and expression.
But yoga is literally what
Falling
reason I
in
could
love
walk. So,
is a thing that strikes like lightning and is therefore extremely analogous to the mystical vision. We don't know how really people attain the mystical vision. There is not as yet a very clear rationale as to how it happens. Because we do know that it is open to many people who never did anything to look for it. Many people, especially in adolescence, have had the mystical vision all of a sudden without the slightest warning and with no previous interest in that kind of thing. On
If
the
you
other
want to
hand,
support,
many people
sure.
who have practiced yoga or Zen disciplines or what you will for years and years and years have never seen it. And
My
in
members
both
get
parties,
that.
there are, of course, exceptions. There are those who have never had this spontaneous experience, and there are those who, through yoga or Zen, have attained this insight. But as yet, we are not clear as to why it comes about. And if there is any method of attaining it, the best one is probably to give up the whole idea again. But you see, it is completely unpredictable. And so it is, in that way, like falling in love, capricious, and therefore crazy. But if you should be so fortunate as to encounter either of these experiences, it seems to me to be a total denial of life to refuse. And what we therefore have to admit in our society so that we can contain this kind of madness, we must be far more realistic about the marriage arrangement so that it can contain the possibility of falling in love. When you base marriage, you see, on falling in love, and you go into a pseudo-love affair, which is simply hot pants, and set up a rigid family in which you expect of the other person that they will always be in love with you. And then, in that context, you go and fall in love. Then your falling in love is a necessity disruptive of the marriage and the family. But you see, it could only disrupt it because the love relationship between the two partners was false, was pretended. But if marriage were based more on the old idea
Yeah,
of
this is
the
where my leg almost got ripped off the first time.
contact between two people to bring up children, who are maybe expected at the best to be good friends, and to allow each other to be persons, that is to say, in the ordinary sense of the word person, who have their own freedom. Then if love strikes, it is tolerated within this arrangement. Provided you not
Should look
to be so
into
unreasonable
how I
as to want
can get people to join my memberships. Yeah, if y'all if y'all join my memberships, then I'll do tattoo tours. I'll be doing aerial
Now, you see, in this way,
as a members only thing.
the necessary stable social institution of family of some kind, without it being constantly threatened of foundering on the rocks of love. Now, you see, this then means that when people marry, if they take any vows for each other, instead of saying that they will always be true to each other in the sense of meaning I will always love you, it means I will be true to you in the sense of I will always be truthful to you. I will not pretend that my feelings towards you are other than what they are. Because I marry you because I think that you are a reasonable person to live with. And therefore I want you to be you. I don't want you to be someone else. I want you to be a rubber stamp with me. How boring that would be. So it is really an arrangement, not of as we always say jokingly, did you get the ball and chain on it? But an arrangement in which people set each other free and make an alliance to cooperate with each other in certain ways. Now, if it should so occur that they are of immense sexual attraction to each other, so much the better. But this should not be a primary factor in entering into marriage. Admittedly, you must be, to a certain extent, attracted to each other, otherwise there will be no progeny. But this seems to me to be a sensible and reasonable view. And just because it is sensible and reasonable, it can accommodate what is not sensible and reasonable, which is falling in love. We should regard then marriage, especially if it should possibly be called holy matrimony, as a mutual setting free of two people to live together in freedom and therefore in responsibility. Because the present situation, although it's pretending to be responsible, is in fact extremely irresponsible. Because it is dishonesty with respect to the way you feel towards another person. Well, now really, when we go back then to falling in love and say it's crazy, fall. You see, we don't say rising into love. There is in it the idea of the fall. And it goes back, as a matter of fact, to extremely fundamental things. That there is always a curious tie at some point between the fall and the creation. Taking this ghastly risk is the condition of there being life. You see, for all, life is an act of faith and an act of gambling. The moment you take a step, you do so on an act of faith because you don't really know that the floor is not going to give under your feet. The moment you take a journey, what an act of faith. The moment you enter into any kind of human undertaking in relationship, what an act of faith. You've given yourself up. But this is the most powerful thing that can be done. Surrender. See, and love is an act of surrender to another person. Total abandonment. I give myself to you. Take me. Do anything you like. See? So, that's quite mad. Because you see, it's letting things get out of control. All sensible people keep things in control. Watch it. Watch it. Watch it. Security. Vigilance. Watch it. Police. Watch it. Guards. Watch it. Who's going to watch the guards? So, actually, therefore, the course of wisdom, what is really sensible, is to let go, is to commit oneself, to give oneself up, and that's quite mad. So we come to the strange conclusion that in madness lies sense.
Budget.
Don't blow this out of proportion. With Artlist AI, the same budget means higher production value. By mixing real footage with AI elements, your team can now create every location, stunts, and dream shots the client needs. Dragons included. Go big without going broke. Go to Artlist and start creating without limits.
There's a commercial.
It relieves that extra pressure that, as a father, provider, and that's one of the main things I was thinking was, how was I going to be able to do this? St. Jude, in my heart, is a savior.
The client wants a blockbuster on a micro budget.
Don't blow this out of proportion. With Artlist AI,
The word yoga the same as our word yoke, Y-O-K-E, and the Latin word jungere, to join. Join, junction, yoke, union.
Actually, that's a good question. I'm trying to figure out how to join membership too.
And so likewise, when Jesus said, my yoke is easy,
Playables.
he would say, really, it's my yoke. And the word therefore basically denotes,
I guess sending gifts? I'm not sure.
of what our psychologists call alienation,
What's the next
or
before
what
going to
our
live?
Buddhists call psychiatry.
Do y'all not see like a what's it called, a membership or join my fan club or something like that?
Cut off from being. And most civilized people
That's what I was
do in
thinking.
fact feel that way,
If I join other people's stuff.
because they have a kind of myopic attention focused on their own boundaries and what is inside those boundaries. And they identify themselves with the inside and don't realize that you cannot have an inside without an outside. That would seem, wouldn't it, to be extremely elementary logic, that we could have no sense of being ourselves, of having a personal identity, without the contrast with something that is not ourselves, that is to say, other. But the fact that we don't realize that self and other go together is the root of an enormous, terrifying anxiety. Because what will happen when the inside disappears? What will happen when the so-called I comes to an end, as it seems to? Because if it didn't, I mean, if things did not keep moving and changing, appearing and dissolving, the universe would be a colossal bore. And therefore, you are only aware that things are all right. I mean, I hope most of the people in this gathering have a sort of genial sense inside them that for the time being, things are going on more or less okay. Some of you may be very miserable. And then your problem may be just a little different, but it's essentially the same one. But you must realize that that sense of life being fairly all right is inconceivable and unfeelable unless there is way, way, way in the back of your mind the glimmer of a possibility that something absolutely unspeakably awful might happen. Doesn't have to happen, because you'll die one day. But there always has to be the vague apprehension, the hinting it under that the awful awfuls are possible. It gives spice to life. Now these observations are in line with what I'm going to talk about tonight, the intellectual approach to yoga. There are basically certain principal forms of yoga. Most people are familiar with Hatha Yoga, which is a psychophysical exercise system, and that's the one you see demonstrated most on television because it has visual value. See all these exercises, the lotus positions, and people curling their legs around their necks, and doing all sorts of marvelous exercises. And they're good exercises. The most honest yoga teacher I know is a woman who teaches Hatha Yoga and doesn't pretend to be any other kind of guru. She does it very well. Then there is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti means devotion. And I suppose in general, you might say that Christianity is a form of Bhakti Yoga. Because it is yoga practiced through extreme reverence for and love for some being felt more or less external to oneself, who's the representative of the divine. Then there is Karma Yoga. Karma means action. And incidentally, that's all it means. It does not mean the law of cause and effect. When we say that something that happens to you is your karma, all it's saying is it's your own doing. Nobody's in charge of karma except you. Karma Yoga is the way of action, of using one's everyday life, one's trade, or an athletic discipline like sailing or surf riding, or track running, as your way of yoga, as your way of discovering who you are. Then there's Raja Yoga. That's the royal yoga. And that's sometimes also called Kundalini Yoga. And that involves very complicated psychic exercises having to do with awakening the serpent power that is supposed to lie at the base of one's spiritual spine and raising it up through certain chakras or centers until it enters into the brain. There's a very profound symbolism involved in that, but I'm not going into that. And then finally there are several others. There's Mantra Yoga. Mantra Yoga, which is the practice through chanting, of humming either out loud or silently certain sounds which we've come supports the contemplation for what is in Sanskrit called jhana. And jhana is the state in which one is clearly awake and aware of the world as it is, as distinct from the world as it is described. In other words, in the state of jhana, you stop thinking. That is to say, you stop talking to yourself and figuring to yourself and symbolizing to yourself what is going on. You simply are aware of what it is. And nobody can say what it is because, as Wojcicki well said, the real world is unspeakable. Lovely double taking. But that's jhana. That's zazen, where one practices to sit absolutely wide awake with eyes open, but not think. That's a very curious state, incidentally. I knew a professor of mathematics at Northwestern University who one day said, "You know, it's amazing how many things there are that aren't so." No, he was talking about old wives' tales and scientific superstitions and so on. But when you practice jhana, you're amazed how many things there are that aren't so. Because when you stop talking to yourself and you are simply aware of what is, that is to say, of what you feel, what you sense, even that saying, you suddenly find that the past and the future completely disappear. So also have disappeared the so-called differentiation between the knower and the known, the subject and the object, the feeler and the feeling, the thinker and the thought. They just aren't there, because you have to talk to yourself to maintain those things. They're purely conceptual, they're ideas, they're phantoms, both. So when you allow thinking to stop, all that goes away. And you find you're in an eternal here and now. And there's nowhere you're supposed to be, there's nothing you're supposed to do, there's nowhere you're supposed to go, because in order to think you're supposed to do something, you have to think. And so it's incredibly important to unthink at least once a day for the very preservation of the intellectual life. Because if you do nothing but think, as you're advised by IBM and by most of the academic teachers and gurus, you've nothing to think about except thoughts. And so you become like a university library, which is a sort of cheese. It has a process in it that is in biology called mitosis. Mitosis is the progressive division of cells into subcells into subcells. So a great university library is very often a place where people bury themselves and write books about the books that are in there. And they only write books, and the library swells. You know, it's like an enormous mass of yeast. raising and raising, and that's all that's going on. I mean, it's a very amusing game. I love to bury my nose in ancient Oriental texts and things like that. It's fun. It's like playing poker, or chess, or doing pure mathematics. But the trouble is that it gets increasingly unrelated to life. Because the thinking is all words about words. So if we stop that temporarily and get our mind clear of thoughts, we become, as Jesus said, again as children, and get a direct view of the world, which is very useful once you're an adult. Not much you can do with it when you're a baby, because everybody pushes you around. You know, they pick you up, sit you there, they sit you there, and you can't do much except practice contemplation. I mean, you can't tell anyone what it's like. But when, as an adult, you can recapture the baby's point of view, you will know what all child psychologists have always wanted to know, how it is that a baby feels. And the baby, according to Freud at least, has the oceanic experience. That is to say, a feeling of complete inseparability from what's going on. The baby is unable to distinguish between the universe and his or her action upon the universe. And most of us, if we got into that state of consciousness, might be inclined to feel extremely frightened. And beginning to ask, who's in charge? I mean, who controls what happens next? We would ask them, because we are used to the idea that the process of nature consists of controllers and controlees, things that do and things that are done to. This is purely mythological. As you find out when you observe the world without thinking, with a purely silent mind. Now, then you see, Jnana Yoga is the approach to that is designed for intellectuals. There is an intellectual way to get to this kind of understanding. A lot of people often say to me, you know, I understand what you're talking about intellectually, but I don't really feel it. I don't realize it. And I'm apt to reply, I wonder whether you do understand it intellectually. Because if you did, you would also feel it. Because the intellect, or what I prefer to call the intelligence, is not a sort of watertight compartment of the mind that goes clickety-clickety all by itself and has no influence on what happens in all other spheres of one's being. For the simple reason we all know that you can be hypnotized by words. Certain words arouse immediately certain feelings. by using certain words. It's very easy, very rapidly, one can change people's emotions. They're incantations. And the intellect is not something separate up there. But the word intellect has become kind of clickety. A word that represents the intellectual porcupinism of the academic world, as a certain professor said at Harvard at the time Tim Leary was making experiments there, no knowledge is academically respectable which cannot be put into words. Alas, for the Department of Physical Education. Alas, for the Department of Music and Fine Arts. And that's very important. Because you see, one of the greatest intellects of modern times was Ludwig Wittgenstein. And as you read the end of his Tractatus, which was his greatest book, he shows you that what you always thought were the major problems of life and philosophy were meaningless questions. And that those problems are solved not by, as it were, giving an answer to them, but by getting rid of the problem through seeing intellectually that it means. And then you're relieved of the problem. You need no longer lie awake nights wondering what is the meaning of life. What's it all about? Simply because it isn't about anything. It's about itself. And so he ends up saying, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must be silent. But there's a new successor to Wittgenstein, an Englishman called Spencer Brown, who's written a book called Laws of Form. And this, if any of you are mathematically minded, I would most firmly recommend it. It's just being published in the United States. And he makes this comment after Wittgenstein. He says, true, there are certain things of which one cannot speak. For example, you cannot describe music. That's why most of the reports of music critics in the newspapers seem completely absurd when they are trying to convey in words how a certain artist performs. And they borrow words from all other kinds of arts and try and make some show of being clever about it. But there is no way in which the music critic, in words, can make you hear the sound of the concert. What? By writing certain instructions on paper, telling you certain things to do, those sounds could be reproduced. So musical notation is essentially a set of instructions telling you certain things to do, and if you do them, you will get an experience which is ineffable and beyond words. This is Spencer Brown pointing out that all mathematics is basically a set of instructions, like describe a circle, draw the perpendicular. And so if you follow certain instructions, then you will understand certain things that cannot be described. And that, of course, that is what yoga is all about. All mystical writing really is instructions. It is not an attempt to describe the universe, to describe God, to describe ultimate reality. Every mystic knows that cannot possibly be done. The very word, mysticism, is from the Greek root muin, which means silence. Wonderful word. Salah. That's it all. But that's it. It's required. See? Then you'll understand. Because the instructions are listen. Listen. See? Or even look. Stop. Look. And listen. That's yoga. And see what's going on. I mean, they'll say it doesn't support it. Like somebody came to a Zen master and said, mountains and hills in the sky, are not all these the body of Buddha? The master said, yes, but it's a pity to say so. Now, by reading, those of you who are mathematically gifted, Spencer Brown's book, Laws of Form, you can go through an intellectual process that is very close indeed to Jnana Yoga. I was so impressed with it, John Lilly turned me on to it, as a matter of fact, that I went over to England especially to see this fellow. And he's quite remarkable. Youngish man. Add up with all sorts of things. If he were a black magician, he would be a real danger to society. But he's not. The point of the book is, he starts out with the instruction. Draw a distinction. Any distinction you want. Between something and nothing, between the inside and the outside, what have you. Any distinction, just draw a distinction. Then he takes you through a process of reasoning where he shows you that once you have made that step, all the laws of mathematics, physics and biology and electronics follow inevitably. And he draws them out. He gets you into the most complicated electronic circuitry system that necessarily follows from your having drawn a distinction. Once you've done that, the universe as we know it is inevitable. After that, he says, I haven't told you anything you didn't already know. At every step when you saw that one of my proofs, one of my theorems was correct, you said, oh, it's false. Why? Because you knew it already. And then at the end of it, where he's shown you that it were the nature of your own mind, he raises the question, was this trip really necessary? So now he takes us in a re-entry job and says, you see, what has happened to all this mathematical process, and also in the course of your own complicated lives, where you've been trying to find out something, of course, that you already knew. What has been happening is the universe has taken one turn. That's the meaning of universe. It has taken a turn on itself, to look at itself. When you see, when anything looks at itself, it escapes itself. As the snake swallowing its tail, as the dog chasing its tail, as trying to grab this hand like that, it gets some of it, but it doesn't get it. And so he makes the amazing remark. Naturally, as our telescopes become more powerful, the universe must expand in order to escape it. Now you will say this is subjective idealism in a new disguise. This is Bishop Berkeley all over again, saying that we create the universe out of our own minds. Well, unfortunately, it's true. And if you take mind to mean brain, physical nervous system, you go and listen to Carl Bribram's lectures at Stanford, you will find him saying the same thing in neurological terms. It's the
Yeah, I do
structure of
have
your
underwear
nervous
on.
system which causes you to see the world that you see. Or read J.Z. Young's book, Doubt and Certainty in Science, where all this is very clearly explained. It's the same old problem in new language. And it's a more complicated language, a more sophisticated, up-to-date, scientifically respectable language. But it's the same old thing. But that's yoga, you see. Yoga Union means that you do it. In a sense, you are God. Tat Namastu, you are making. So many spiritual teachers and gurus will look at their disciples and say, I am God. I have realized. See? But the important thing is that you are. Whether I am or not, no consequence whatsoever. I could get up and say, I have realized. I put on a turban, yellow robe, whatever. And say, come and have darshan. I'm Guru. You need the grace of Guru in order to realize and so on. And it would be a wonderful hope. It'd be like picking your pockets and selling you your own watch. But the point is, you are. Now what are we saying when we say that? We're obviously saying something very important. Alas and alack, there is no way of defining it. That is to say, going any further into words about it. See, when a philosopher hears such a statement as Tattvamasi, you are it, or there is only the eternal now, the philosopher says, yes, I don't see why else they're excited about it. What do you mean by that? And that he asks that question because he wants to continue in a word game. He doesn't want to go on into an experiential dimension. He wants to go on arguing because that's his trip. And all these great mystical statements mean nothing whatsoever. They're ultimate statements. Just as, you know, the trees and the clouds and the mountains and the stars have no meaning. Because they're not words. Words have meaning. Because they're symbols. Because they point to something other than themselves. But the stars, like music, music only bad music, music never has meaning. And to understand it, you must simply listen. And
Ooh-wee.
go into its complexity. So, you get, when your mind, that is to say your vocal system, get to the end of their tether, that is to say, when they arrive...
Oh, there's Midas. Alright, well, I'm gonna head out. Yeah, I got some disrespectful ass comments today. So I'm gonna start saying, if there's no way to join my membership, then go ahead and send me some money on Cash App and I'll make a video specifically for you. How about? The Cash App is 8 Sacred 8 Sam. I don't drink those toxins. The fuck?
You can do this in philosophy study, if you've got the right kind of...
8 Sacred 8 Sam 8.
Who tells you that all philosophical opinions
There's a Cash
whatsoever are
App.
false. Or at least, if not false, extremely partial. You can see how...
I know Yogi ever drinks Red Bull. That's for damn sure.
How the determinists cancel out the free willers. And then how someone comes in and says, then you get an awful and if you get seriously into the study of theology and society,
How old are you, dude? I don't perform for children. That's just creepy. If you're a child, get the fuck off my page. Nobody fucking wants you here. Y'all are the reason I put on underwear. children to thank for that. I wanted to say, Stray Kids Sunshine, thank you so much for being actually a decent human being, which is pretty fucking hard to find out here in the wild west of the internet. Hopefully it doesn't burn. I do this because I've had my spine and hips shatter, and yoga is actually the reason I can walk. So yoga was incredibly healing for me, so that's why I do this for free. Yeah, I wore mine today, and people are like, "Oh, I see your cat." No, the fuck you don't see shit, you blind dickbag. So, normally, like after this, I'm taking the fuck off because it's uncomfortable as shit. They just wad up my butthole, and I don't like it. But I was kind of figuring some child's gonna walk in here. Yeah, it wasn't on purpose. But yeah, this is me in my coma after the accident. And then this is my car that I got pulled out of this side. I don't know how the fuck I got pulled out of that. That's the driving column, or the steering column, so, and that's the passenger seat, and I had no passengers. But yeah, that's what I got pulled out of, and that's also why I do yoga, because it saved my life. My ability to walk. You don't want me to feel funny about the sexual explicit comments that people keep posting on my shit? I don't think, did you post any sexual explicit shit? Because that's just, it's gross. Like, it makes me want to fucking vomit in my mouth. Like, a speeding Suburban going downhill made of steel. And then I also got hit by another Suburban on my way on my bicycle, going the wrong direction at a red light, running a red light. So, and that shattered my lower legs. But yoga, I want to say breath work is actually what helped me get out of that pain. Breath work and that water device right here. I don't know, fucking speeding people. People going nowhere in a hurry. It was also like, while I was getting in my coma, another person had their head lobbed off. Thanks. Yeah, but somebody, like, they literally put up a, what's it called? They literally put up a stoplight where I got hit afterwards because somebody had their head chopped off. With the same area. Like, it was a dangerous intersection. And I don't know if no, I pulled out in front of somebody that was speeding. And I got creamed. Yeah, my heart exploded, my brain exploded, like every fucking bone in my body shattered. It was a long recovery. Yoga helped me to walk again. And this device here got me out of pain. Like, I literally been on all these herbs and stuff for years. I'm blessed, not lucky. Fuck. Luck was getting hit, I guess, but luck was finding the water device. And luck was also being able to get it paid for because it's tax write-off. But you also weren't slow. What? Yeah, I got T-boned. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? You smile in there, thanks. After my stroke, because of hospital malpractice, so it's like fucking people are kind of cunts is the thing, and after a while I just get tired of people just sitting there talking to me if they want to. Like, I'm human. I'm not some gross piece of ass that you're fucking looking for. I'm here to support humans, not your fucking dicks.
Because you don't need anything.
Yeah, it does help. I got fucking grit is what I got.
The great master of this technique was a
Thanks, bitch.
Buddhist scholar.
Yeah, I died fucking like 8 times because of the accident. Like I literally, these are all scars. I don't know if y'all can see them or not, but that's what my tattoos surround.
Called Machamisa.
What's your need for curse?
The, as it were, leader of the students would simply destroy all their ideas.
I don't, what?
Absolutely abolish their philosophical
Yucky baby.
And they get the heebie-jeebies.
I'm just annoyed that people sit here and talk to me like the way that they fucking do.
They see he didn't have
It's
it.
disgusting. It's repulsive, actually. So
He seemed perfectly relaxed and not having any particular
it's
politics.
dehumanizing. Just like I've been treated inhumanely in my entire life. From the hospital. Actually, from my parents who abandoned me. Who came to get me while I was in the hospital. But then also in the hospital, I had a stroke because a dehumanizing woman decided to take out my alarms while I was living second to second. And this scenario here, like I was living on ventilators and stuff like that, she pulled everything out so she could go do my drugs. And then I had a stroke. So it's, people are fucking annoying. Did you say something, Greg? But that's what I was like doing, scrolling through here, seeing what the comments were. But yeah, old school suburban against the Kia Rio going downhill. My life changed. Like I was 2 days away from being a hot dog at where I worked and about to graduate college, all that stuff, and everything changed. And now I have a stalker and I'm working with landlords and stuff like that who are actually giving me attention for fucking once about the stalker who is my neighbor. Like it's just been hell in a handbasket since I came back to life, and I don't know why I came back. I'd say I'm kind of fucking annoyed that I came back, to be honest with you. Why are you cursing out? You said yoga saved you, but you're like swearing as... You're not fucking Yoga Paul. Get the fuck off my page, dickface. Bye. You know, my people that try to stifle my seat of expression can kiss my fucking dick. That goes for you. You don't fucking pay me money. Get off my fucking shit. You're welcome. Yoga saved my life. Yoga saved my ability to walk, as a matter of fact. Actually, it didn't really save my life. I was paralyzed, for one thing, so yeah. It energetically saved me.
Now, you see, if you understand what I'm saying,
The one that you can kiss, yeah. Choke on it. 5-year-old motherfucker. Fucked your dad with it last night, too. He enjoyed it.
but I didn't feel it. Then next I'm going to feel it. Why do you want to feel it? You say,
I keep talking about your scene, looking at my cat and stuff, like you want to be all disrespectful. Why are you trying to, oh, why are you cussing? Go fuck yourself.
there is nothing to pursue because you're it.
Yeah,
And if you don't know
it's
that,
not a pussy you've been looking at, it's my fucking dick. Now cut it out.
And if you don't know that, in other words, to put it in Christian terms, or Jewish terms, if you don't know that you're God from the beginning, what happens is that you try to become God by force.
Yeah, it was yoga I was doing. Because it helps me to align my stuff, and then I read all those comments and the hateful stuff.
All our competitiveness, all our terrific anxiety to survive.
Yeah, it's fine. I don't give a fuck for their feelings. They didn't give a shit for mine, so. They want to dehumanize me. Fuck them. They can get dehumanized. Enjoy.
When you were a baby.
But yeah, yoga is the reason I can walk.
Nothing would ever happen.
It was a battle to be able to sit on my knees for the first time in my life. Actually, not for the first time, but like after the wreck, because it took me. I was 3 months in ICU.
And it's,
Shit just kept getting worse and worse, and until I started standing up for myself, it didn't fucking, there was no change.
As they say, well, take the Hindus. It's basic to Hindu
No, still
religion.
using your stress. You have no sex with anyone. I don't want sex with anyone. Like, what the fuck? You don't think I can take care of myself? The people around me aren't really worth my fucking getting into me. And you certainly aren't, so.
But if that is the case, if Hindu
If this is gonna be like a fucking, are you flirting with me? What?
by the knowledge
No,
of their union with the Godhead
my fucking,
would simply
I'm the best at what I do. People know me.
that Hindu music.
Read my comments. Why are you still talking to me? Why are you even still in here? How old are you? Are you of age to be in my thing?
When they sit and play, they laugh at each other. They're enjoying themselves. It's not.
Plus, I haven't had my coffee. So get the fuck out of here if you're still
When we come
complaining about
to the
that.
office, everybody dresses in evening.
And nobody pays me here, so it's like I do this shit for free, and then everybody's like, "Oh, why are you so upset?" Like, read my fucking comment things, dude. All right, I'm gonna head out. Bye, so I can go make money elsewhere.
As they compete with each other in all kinds of marvelous improvisation.
Stress out as if people is guilty of my life.
So,
My life is great. Who the fuck are you? We're gonna remove you, and report you because you're obviously same-sex oriented. Get the fuck out of here.
You know, you start laughing.
Hate speech.
Laughing leads to dancing.
Harassment, bullying.
Dancing leads to music. And we can play with each other. For a change.
Have fun with your sexless lives. Bye, guys.